Okay, so we continue our reading of Areopagitica. So Milton was talking about this difficulty in having the whole truth for man, and obviously truth for him stands for religious truth, which of course for Milton comprehends all truth. Not the unflocking of a priest, the unmitering of a bishop, and the removing him from off the Presbyterian shoulders that will make us a happy nation. No, if other things as great in the church and in the rule of life, both economical and political, be not looked into and reformed, we have looked so long upon the blaze that Zwingli and Calvin have beckoned up to us that we are stark blind. So Zwingli, the Swiss reformer, and Calvin, who also lived in Geneva, though he was French. So these two leaders of the Reformation, they are being compared to the sun, and we can say that we are still dazzled by their light, and in the light of their knowledge, we must reform both economical and political aspects of our lives. So Milton uses the word economical in the Greek sense, in the Aristotelian sense, oikonomikos, which means domestic. So both domestic life and political or civil life, that is public life, must be corrected, must be properly shaped, following the education, following the suggestions by Calvin and Zwingli. So it is not the unflocking of a minister, that somebody who is unable to preach properly or who preaches some wrong faith. It is not that which we want. We means the Protestants, those who are in power. So what we want is that not a vindictive state, but a state that would reform all aspects of people's lives, domestic and public, under the light, in the light of the suggestions by the Reformation leaders. There be who perpetually complain of schisms and sects and make it such a calamity that any man dissents from their maxims. It is their own pride and ignorance which causes the disturbing, who neither will hear with meekness nor can convince, yet all must be suppressed which is not found in their syntagma. Syntagma is a body of doctrine arranged in a systematic treatise. So there are some people who think that they can control every expression and by including it in their system of knowledge, in their syntagma, but they are actually disturb others. They are the troublers. They are the dividers of unity, who neglect and permit not others to unite those dissevered pieces which are yet wanting to the body of truth. The true meaning of this cannot be understood unless we look at it in the context of the religious controversies and debates between the different Protestant and Puritan sects. So there was even a lot of intolerance among the Protestants themselves, and therefore any attempt at the formation of a system, a religious system, would always be risky and would always exclude some ideas, some sects, some beliefs. Therefore, this kind of people, these people who try to act in a way as licensed, they try to accept or reject other sects, other beliefs. They end up by focusing on division rather than on unity. Therefore, their activities, Milton here is talking about the orthodox in every sect. So their activities hinder the unity of all Protestants, and this attempt of unifying the different Protestant beliefs is metaphorically here compared by Milton to uniting the dissevered pieces of the body of Osiris. So we are still searching what we know not by what we know, still closing up truth to truth as we find it, for all her body is homogeneal and proportional. This is the golden rule in theology as well as in arithmetic, and make up the best harmony in a church, not the forced and outward union of cold and neutral and inwardly divided minds. So the rule of proportion was considered the golden rule in arithmetic, and Milton says that we can identify something, some idea as truth by putting it in relation to another idea which has already been accepted as truth. So this is the way that you close truth by truth. In fact, Milton is not saying anything new. It is also the Aristotelian idea of syllogism, where there is one maxim which is accepted and then another maxim which is proposed, and there is a maxim in between which connects the two. Truth therefore should be, both in theology or in arithmetic, a product of applying the rule of proportion, the golden rule of proportion, and not an apparent truth where actually people are divided. And in the next paragraph we have an inspired passage where Milton compares the English nation as a rising power. So we have a sense of nationalism here, an enthusiastic nationalism, and this part of the oration, if you look at it as an oration, this part is not directly arguing for or against censorship. So we may call it a digression. As you know, that digression was also an important part of an oration. So I have argued that in my paper on Legio Praetorica, analyzed rhetorically. Lords and Commons of England, consider what nation it is whereof you are, and whereof you are the governors. A nation not slow and dull, but of a quick, ingenious and piercing spirit, acute to invent, subtle and sinewy to discourse, not beneath the reach of any point the highest that human capacity can soar. So here we have the image of soaring. The human capacity can soar very high, and a little later Milton uses the image of an eagle, because eagles can soar very high, as well as eagles are also powerful. So this new nation, not new but renewed, we will say, nation of England after the end of monarchy, now it is like a powerful eagle which can soar very high. Therefore the studies of learning in her deepest sciences have been so ancient and so eminent among us, that writers of good antiquity and ageless judgment have been persuaded that even the school of Pythagoras and the Persian wisdom took beginning from the old philosophy of this island. Now Pythagoras was the 6th century Greek philosopher, mathematician and mystic. Milton refers to the doctrine of transmigration of souls. Pliny supposed that this doctrine originated in Persia, but Milton suggests that it originated actually in England. This kind of thing we always find in Renaissance texts. So the doctrine of transmigration of souls or rebirth, as we know that India also from ancient times believed in rebirth, reincarnation, and since when Milton was writing, India's intellectual prowess was not known. So the ancient world for the English at that time ended with Persia and Greek. So the idea that the Greek got this notion from the Persians Milton glorifies the English nation by saying that the English got this notion first, from them the Persians and the Greeks got it. It is similar to the French philosopher Peter Remus, who writing on literature suggested that the Greeks learned how to write poems from ancient Gauls. So the ancient Gauls, their culture was the most ancient for Remus, and even the Greeks learned everything from them. So that is an attempt to glorify one's own nation, which was common in the Renaissance, because in the Renaissance this idea of a nation, the idea of a nation state, that was gradually coming into shape. The Persian wisdom took beginning from the old philosophy of this island, and that wise and civil Roman Julius Agricola, who governed once here for Caesar, preferred the natural wits of Britain before the laboured studies of the French. The Roman Emperor of England, when England was colonized by Rome, Julius Agricola, Milton says that he preferred English scholarship over French scholarship. Again, here Milton's source is Tacitus. Tacitus's book Agricola. Nor is it for nothing that the grave and frugal Transylvanian sends out yearly from as far as the mountainous borders of Russia and beyond the Hercynian wilderness, not their youth but their staid men, to learn our language and our theologic arts. Transylvania, of course, today is Romania and Hungary. So it was an independent country from 1541 to 1683, and in the 17th century it was a Protestant realm. Hercynian wilderness refers to a large forest in Germany. So people from these countries sent their scholars to England for being educated, but for being educated in theology also. Yet that which is above all this, the favour and the love of heaven, we have great argument to think in a peculiar manner propitious and propending towards us. Why also was this nation chosen before any other, that out of her as out of Sion should be proclaimed and sounded forth the first tidings and trumpet of Reformation to all Europe? The chosen nation. That is a favorite metaphor with the English and the Americans. So the English thought they were the chosen nations, and Milton expresses this idea here. Like the Israelites in ancient times, in the Bible, the Israelites are the chosen nation of God. So they are supposed to show the entire world the true light of religion. Taking this trope from the Bible, the English, they thought that they were the chosen nation of God. And after them, the Americans, as they became, the American colonies, particularly in New England, were Puritan Congregationalist colonies, and they thought themselves to be the chosen nation. And that trope kind of continues, and even today America considers itself to be the leader of the world because of this idea. The idea of city on a hill, another metaphor that we find in the Bible. The city on a hill, Jerusalem, the earthly Jerusalem, it is a reflection of the heavenly Jerusalem. So the city on a hill is a metaphor, a city which is the model for all other nations, all other. So Milton says that the trumpet of Reformation was blown first in England. Now, we know that Wycliffe and Huss, they were early reformers. Before the leaders like Luther, Calvin and Zwingli led the Reformation, before that such reformist ideas were preached by Wycliffe in England and Huss in Czechoslovakia. but for that to call England to be the birthplace of Reformation, that is a little exaggeration. And then Milton goes on to say that Wycliffe and Huss, they also made some mistakes. Had it not been the obstinate perverseness of our prelates against the divine and admirable spirit of Wycliffe to suppress him as a schismatic and innovator, perhaps neither the Bohemian Huss and Jerome, no, not the name of Luther or of Calvin had been ever known. Jerome was from Prague. Huss was from Bohemia, which is also nearby. Huss advanced Wycliffe's heretical doctrines and strengthened the Reform movement at Prague University. He was condemned as a heretic and burnt at the stake. So Milton suggests here that the bishops, they persecuted Wycliffe and called him a schismatic and a heretic. And but without Wycliffe, Huss and other leaders of the Reformation like Luther, Calvin, Jerome, they would not have been possible. The glory of reforming all our neighbors had been completely ours. So we see how Milton takes the, makes the claim that the Reformation started in England, depending upon the single name of Wycliffe, which is of course a tall claim. God is decreeing to begin some new and great period in His church, even to the reforming of Reformation itself. What does He then but reveal Himself to His servants, and as His manner is, first to His Englishmen? So in this part we have an apocalyptic vision. Milton is thinking of certain examples set by God in England by having such great reformers and spiritual leaders in England. So God is reforming the Reformation itself through such men. I say as His manner is first to us, though we mark not the method of His counsels and are unworthy. So we cannot judge God's ways, therefore we cannot truly understand. But nevertheless, God definitely works in England to give Reformation the leadership. Behold now this vast city, a city of refuge, the mansion house of liberty. That is, London is a city where reformers from other countries, they can take refuge. Many Dutch men were persecuted in their country, and also some Germans, some French, who were persecuted by the Roman Catholic rulers. They came to England. So England was a great refuge for the Protestants. The mansion house of liberty, encompassed and surrounded with His protection. The shop of war had not there more anvils and hammers waiting to fashion out the plates and instruments of armed justice in defense of beleaguered truth. So here we have the metaphor of a siege. So truth is beleaguered like a castle is under siege. Then there are the paints and heads there, sitting by their studious lamps, musing, searching, revolving new notions and ideas wherewith to present, as with their homage and their fealty, the approaching Reformation. So, great number of men in England think, write and preach the true religion. What wants there to such a towardly and pregnant soil, but wise and faithful labourers, to make a knowing people, a nation of prophets, of sages and of worthies? What wants, that is what lacks in England, are labourers. So the leaders are already here. The thinkers are already here. What lacks are the labourers who will carry forward the work of the Reformation. So England will be a nation of knowers, a nation of prophets, of sages. But this very process of learning and dissemination of knowledge is hindered by censorship. Under these fantastic terrors of sect and schism, we wrong the earnest and zealous thirst after knowledge and understanding which God has stirred up in this city. The thirst for knowledge and understanding in London, Milton is very proud of it. And in a way, even today, if you go to London, you travel by the tube or by public transport, you will see that people are always reading. Unlike in our country, they do not chat or shout, but in the public transport you will see, particularly the white Englishmen or white English people, men and women, with books in their hands, reading silently. And they are a contrast to other people in the same tube or in the same transport who are not reading but who are talking, chatting and quarreling, which means that the habit of reading is very ancient in India. And Milton, as early as the 17th century, he is taking pride in this, that the English people have a thirst for knowledge. Page 208. How the Protestant leaders in England, how the thinkers and writers, they are being opposed. Yet these are the men cried out against for schismatics and sectaries, as if while the temple of the Lord was building, some cutting, some squaring the marble, others hewing the cedars, there should be a sort of irrational men who could not consider there must be many schisms and many deceptions made in the quarry and in the timber, ere the house of God can be built. This is very interesting. So Milton justifies division in opinion, sects, the formation of sects, the formation of different groups, the formation of different faith, the formation of different opinions. Milton justifies all these by saying, by comparing this building of knowledge to the building of the house of the Lord or a temple. So when somebody is building a temple, one has to saw and split woods. One has to do a lot of cutting and sectioning of timber. And those who are opposing the proliferation of different opinions, Milton compares them to a group of men who during the building of the temple who oppose irrationally that the wood should be cut or should be sectioned. So the implicit idea is that no building is possible unless there is initially a lot of division of opinion, a lot of argumentation, a lot of debate. They fret and out of their own weakness are in agony. These divisions and subdivisions will undo us. The adversary again applauds and waits the hour when they have branched themselves out, said he, small enough into parties and partitions, then will be our time. So the enemies of truth, they say that when these sects, they will be divided into tinier and tinier groups, then it will be our time. Then they will be able to command and control them. Fool, he sees not the first root out of which we all grow into branches, nor will beware until he see our small divided maniples cutting through at every angle of his ill-united and unwieldy brigade. Maniples, subdivisions of the Roman legion. So, whether it is compared to a tree which has one single root, but it branches out, it divides out into many branches, or it is compared to smaller units of the Roman army, maniples of the Roman legion. Such divisions do not weaken the body, but they remain united in spite of their division. Who is the opposition, who is the opponents of truth cannot see. Milton again uses the metaphor of a city under siege, as truth is under siege here. Next, it is a lively and cheerful presage of our happy success and victory. That is, even though the city may be under siege, Milton alludes to Hannibal seizing the city of Rome. Lords and Commons and from thence derives itself to a gallant bravery and well-grounded contempt of their enemies, as if there were no small number of as great spirits among us as his was, who when Rome was nigh besieged by Hannibal, being in the city, bought that piece of ground at no cheap rate, whereon Hannibal himself encamped his own regiment. Here Milton is alluding to the civil wars. During the civil wars, London and its suburbs were often threatened by nearby royalist strongholds and attacks. For example, in November 1642, the royalist army advanced to Turnham Green, 123. The great Carthaginian general Hannibal fought for many years in Italy, but was ultimately unable to defeat Rome. So Milton uses this example of the siege of Rome. So even though truth is besieged by so many false opinions, ultimately it will be victorious, just as Rome was victorious in spite of the siege by Hannibal. The comparison of England during the civil wars to Rome during Hannibal's attack is to suggest that even during civil war, England was full of intellectual debate, as Romans were when they were besieged by Hannibal. So intellectual debate is always beneficial to the country. Not only was it to guard well its own freedom and safety, but to spare and to bestow upon the solidest and sublimest points of controversy and new invention, it betokens us not degenerated nor drooping to a fatal decay, but casting off the old and wrinkled skin of corruption to outlive these pangs and wax young again, entering the glorious age of truth and prosperous virtue. It is time to become great and honorable in these latter ages. So Milton says that England is renewing itself. So even though the civil wars suggest that the sects are all fighting among themselves and England is becoming weak, but actually England is renewing herself, and as a snake casts off its dead skin, similarly, and then renews itself, similarly, the nation will also be young again. And then we have this these inspired lines, which refer to his vision, which constitutes his vision. Methinks I see in my mind a noble and puissant nation, puissant means powerful nation, rousing herself like a strong man after sleep and shaking her invincible locks. So here we have the image of Samson. Now Samson had all his strength in his locks. Methinks I see her as an eagle viewing her mighty youth and kindling her undazzled eyes at the full midday beam. Mewing is the old spelling for mewing, M-E-W-I-N-G. Mewing is a term for molting when a bird sheds its feathers. So, just as Milton earlier used the image of snake casting its dead skin, similarly the eagle sheds its feathers, old feathers, that is molting or mewing, and then it renews itself. And Milton uses the mythical belief that an eagle can look into the sun. An eagle is so powerful that it can withstand the beams of the sun. So this full midday sun, that is the metaphor for truth. So one who is weak cannot look at the whole truth. So this overemphasis on the concept of truth in this treatise makes me remember Bacon's essay that begins, "What is truth?" asked jesting Pilate. So there also Bacon talks about truth in the religious sense. The Pilate, Pilate who arrested Jesus Christ, he asked, "What is truth?" So we was told that Jesus stands for the truth. So for truth is not for everybody to understand, and it has a way of its own to conquer falsehood. So here Milton imagines or compares in his imagination the English nation rising like the eagle, moving her mighty youth and kindling her undazzled eyes at the full midday beam, purging and unscaling her long abused sight at the fountain itself of heavenly radiance. This sense of purging, sense of renewing. So her eyesight, which had all those impurities out of long abuse, by looking at the sun, they are all shed and purged. While the whole noise of timorous and flocking birds, with those also that love the twilight, flutter about, amazed at what she means. So other birds cannot understand the eagle, and there are birds that like the twilight. That is, those who do not want the whole truth and go for falsehood, they like the twilight. And in their envious gabble would prognosticate a year of sects and schisms. So the other birds, in their gabble, in their chattering, they appear to be a group of sects divided into schisms. So the eagle can look at the whole truth, the other birds are divided into schisms. What should you do then? Should you suppress all this flowery crop of knowledge and new life sprung up and yet springing daily in this city? Should you set an oligarchy of 20 engrossers over it to bring a famine upon our minds again? So Milton suggests that 20 licensers should not be given the monopoly of knowledge. It is the liberty, lords and commons, which your own valorous and happy counsels have purchased us, liberty which is the nurse of all great wits. This is that which has rarefied and enlightened our spirits like the influence of heaven. He unto liberty, praise of liberty. So liberty here stands for intellectual liberty and the liberty of expression, the liberty of expressing one's idea. This is that which has rarefied and enlightened our spirits. This is that which has enfranchised, enlarged and lifted up our apprehensions degrees above themselves. You cannot make us now less capable, less knowing, less eagerly pursuing of the truth, unless you first make yourselves that made us so. So here, through the appearance of praising the lords of the parliament, Milton is actually criticizing them and also appealing to them, not to not to pass the censorship, not to continue with the censorship. So he says that we have learnt liberty from you because you were our leaders in freeing England from the rule of tyrants and false religion. Therefore, unless you change yourselves into false men, then until that we cannot be expected to change. You cannot make us now less capable, less knowing, less eagerly pursuing of the truth, unless you first make yourselves that made us so, less the lover, less the founder of our true liberty. We can grow ignorant again, brutish, formal and slavish as you found us, but you then must first become that which you cannot be, oppressive, arbitrary and tyrannous as they were from whom you have freed us. So Milton's argument is that you are going against your very own faith, your very own dogma. Because as leaders of the English Revolution, you have shown us the way against tyranny, against oppression, against monarchy, against false religion. And now you cannot go against yourselves by supporting censorship. So I'll stop here. If you have any questions.